Thank
It
you.
is now my pleasure to introduce another Joseph, Mr. Joseph Lorenzo Hall, Joe for the friends. He's our Senior Vice President, Internet Strong, and Joe is going to talk a bit more about how we have strengthened the Internet in 2020 and beyond, I should say, right, Joe? Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was definitely truly inspiring, Joseph, from one Joe to another. Let me tell you, that's amazing stuff. 2020 has been full of challenge, so full of challenge. And we hope that by highlighting some of these stories, we show that there has been some diamonds that come out of the rough, so to speak. And what I'm going to talk about are the resilience and security elements of ISOC's work. And by all means, you are our customers. You are the people that we're trying to make sure when we say the internet is for everyone. There's a whole chunk of the planet that isn't connected, but the ones that are excited about connecting and building out networks and connectivity are exactly all of you. So thank you so much for being there for us this year. So in 2020, we focused on creating tools and fostering really important relationships that advocate for a strong internet while making sure that we involve the community along the way. And that we had no choice, obviously. That's a really important part of how we do our work. And with COVID, as I'll talk about, it became even more. We did a bunch of things this year. With a bunch of our new projects, we set a ton of groundwork for technical work and advocacy in 2021. We importantly mapped out a bunch of audiences. This is something that may be unfamiliar to many of you, unless you have a communications background. But when you speak, like we do so much in so many ways, you need to speak with an audience in mind and know what's important to those audiences, what's important to chapter members, what's important to chapter leaders compared to chapter members. We have to know those things. We spent a lot of time defining specific stances about certain kinds of technical subjects and policy issues. And we very carefully established a bunch of relationships with key stakeholders that can help us make sure that the internet is for everyone and that it's a strong, secure internet. COVID-19 made it really difficult to do all this stuff, but it even, as Joseph had said, it made it even more important that we had this connectivity and that people trusted the connectivity. Connectivity isn't worth a whole lot if you can't trust that connectivity. And when we talk about trustworthiness, we talk about security, resiliency, interoperability, the fact that it's open and you can play with it and build on it. These became extremely important with remote work and remote schooling. I know a bunch of the parents out there were not ready to suddenly also be the teachers and do their work at the same time. And those of us who've had to adapt our work to home environments, sometimes it can be really rough. You may not have the connectivity. You may not have any connectivity. And then making sure that, one of the things that the COVID really highlighted was connecting online, and often in some of the most gravest of circumstances. I can't tell you how heartbreaking but hopeful it was to see people saying the last words to a loved one who was in isolation with COVID over a video link. That was completely unthinkable 10 years ago, right? In some places it's unthinkable now, but we need to work on that. We faced a ton of challenges. Our teams had to go remote, teams that are usually working right next to each other or seeing each other often in certain kinds of environments no longer could do that. And more importantly, we had to adapt to make sure that we engaged with the community, all of you folks, and better met your needs and worked with you to try and do things, not just as us, but with in unison together to do things. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about some of the successes from the projects. There are an amazing amount of things that I could talk about. So we've picked a few, and by all means, if you have a pet one that you really want to know about or that I don't mention, please ask in the Q&A. We have project leaders on the call right now who can talk about these kinds of things. Our encryption project started up and just hit the ground running amazingly. Despite COVID and all that kind of stuff, we launched something called the Global Encryption Coalition, which is a global coalition of coalitions, just like the internet is a network of networks. We have 8 priority countries with small coalitions that then feed up into a global coalition. It's currently at I think the last number I heard was 115 members. That could be more now. I'm not sure. It tends to grow quite a bit, but that surpasses our goal of having 100 members in this coalition. And this coalition isn't just the Internet Society. It also involves the Center for Democracy and Technology and Global Partners Digital. And I apologize to the translators and captioners. I talk way too fast. I will try to slow down. We signed on to a number of open letters to governments and legislators trying to persuade them not to do violence to encryption. It's the glue that holds everything together. Don't mess with it. Published a bunch of individual fact sheets that you can use talking about specific aspects of encryption in your work, or to convince people that encryption is important. And we published a paper on quantum computing and the effects of something called quantum computing on encryption, which could once it's here, render a lot of the encryption we use right now worthless, so to speak. So we have to prepare for that. Our time security project had a bunch to show for their work this year. There was a set of community resources that they're developing for deployment of something called network time security and the network time protocol, which is network time security is an extension of the network time protocol. We've deployed a bunch of secure time nodes, time server nodes that present the world with secure time resources. And these are useful for testing new NTS clients. If you have a client that is going to be using secure time, you can actually use these nodes to test your clients against. These are based on open source implementations of network time security. One's called Crony, the other's called NTPsec. We also are in the process of finalizing a website to serve as an ongoing community-based repository of network time security information, including a best current practice for operating NTP. So even if you can't do secure time yet, you need to do good insecure time before you can do good secure time. And then we coordinated some test events, including one at IETF 108 in the hackathon, which resulted in the release of the first network time security test tool. Moving along, our Internet Way of Networking project was set out this year to actually answer the question, what makes the Internet so special? And they answered it. And they came out with something called the Internet Impact Assessment Toolkit that talks about these 5 critical properties that if any of these critical properties, a general purpose network, a common naming system like the DNS, these are important things that make the internet work. If any of these properties are diminished or undermined, it starts to undermine the value we get out of the aggregate internet. And we published this Internet Impact Assessment Toolkit after a very successful and widely participated PDP, policy development process, where we come to you and say, hey, here's something we're doing. Let us know if we're off or if you like it. There have been a number of use cases on interconnection, intermediary liability, and data localization that show how these kinds of issue areas and proposals can affect how the internet works. We also partnered with our Brazil chapter to develop a university course at Fundação Getúlio Vargas in Sao Paulo. And most recently, if you're really into the nerdery of interfaces and APIs, application programming interfaces, we published a white paper on the issue of mandating openness in certain kinds of these interfaces. Regulators may say, hey, we want your interface to do this. Well, is that a good or a bad idea? What are the things you need to think about if you're going to do that? This paper addresses all of those things. Next slide, please. Awesome. So moving right along to 2 other projects. The routing security area with mutually agreed norms for routing security, Manners. Manners has been around for 5 years. It's a jewel in our crown. They had some very serious challenges. A lot of the Manners work involves going to IETF, going to the NOG meetings, going to meetings of the RIRs, and giving workshops and saying, hey, we should really be more secure with our routing, advocating for routing security. We have no travel because traveling spreads the virus, and it's some places like those of us in the United States are probably not going to be let into many countries for a long time. And so what we had to do is, in AFTAB and the team, the Manners team, were super innovative and established an ambassador and fellowship program and tweaked it a bit so that instead of us and people that we work with going directly out, we had ambassadors and fellows working in their regional areas to actually do things around manners, be it training, be it research, be it policy, and things like that. We've reached 500 manners network operators this year, which is a big deal. And we're, that's a lot of network operators. It's nowhere near all of the network operators. And then Manners also organized with UbuntuNet Alliance and Afrinic a 3-week training course on routing security that had a lot of presentation from many of the national research and education networks. And finally, but absolutely not least, last but not least, in any stretch of the imagination, is the Open Standards Everywhere project, which set out to make it easy to deploy modern, secure, fast, reliable web servers. They stood up 4 reference servers, and you can find all of this stuff on GitHub. So 4 reference servers using 2 different web servers, Nginx and Apache are the technical names for the web servers, with CDN front ends. So if you had a content distribution network on the front of your website. There's a ton of documentation and implementation guides about how to actually build these kinds of websites easily and maintain them. We have all this documentation and such on GitHub. We can point you to it. Hopefully someone will drop a link in the chat to that stuff. In terms of how that's changed and impacted things, we saw chapters just do amazing things with this. For example, the ISOC Kolkata chapter was at 32% in terms of security, so bad, and internet protocol stuff. But they were able to, with a good bit of work and using some of our advice and contributing back to us, they were able to get their website up to 100% compliance, which means as secure as we can make it, as resilient as we can make it, using all modern protocols. Like, you don't want me to get. I won't start on modern protocols. ISOC hosted websites went in aggregate from 72 to about 93% compliance, and Dan is probably on the call and can probably correct. He may not be on the call. Someone can correct me. We may have gotten closer to 100 with ISOC hosted websites since I wrote these notes, but I'm not exactly sure. Okay, that's enough from me, a talking head, another white man talking at you. To humanize this work, we really wanted to have a member of our community, Theorose Elikplim Dzineku. I totally butchered your name. I'm really sorry, Theorose. Of the ISOC Ghana chapter, to talk about some of the encryption work she has been engaged in over the past year. Thank you so much for joining us, Theorose, and take it away.
Good afternoon to everyone. I hope you can hear me now.
Sounds great.
It's nice to have you all here. So my name is Theorose Elikplim Dzineku. I'm currently based in Ghana, and I'm from Ghana. I'm the current chair for programs and communication for ISOC Ghana. My training journey was a smooth one. I will just want to establish the basis of my training and why the issue of encryption is so great to me. I quite remember when the call came in for training, I opted for another option, not encryption. Because, when I heard the name encryption, I just told myself that, guys, this is for technical people. It's not for me at all. Like, I can't get used to the big words that the IT people use. I'm a trained journalist. I have no basic knowledge in IT, so I wanted just something that has no internet words in it. But unfortunately, I didn't get that, so I just have to be stuck with the encryption training. But I just told myself that, well, that is what I have now, and that is the option available. So I'll try as much as possible to make good use of the opportunity that was provided. And I must admit that it was one of the best decisions that I've taken this year, because the teaching was so good. It was very simple. Like, it was so basic. I understood everything. And I really loved it. And I hope to do more. So at the end of the project or the training, I made some few things. I implemented I actually wrote a research paper, because at the end of the project we were to implement a project. Various options were given, and I chose to write a research paper. And now my research paper was actually focused on the journalism industry in Ghana. I had wanted to find out how journalists that are working on the field understand the concept of encryption and how they applied that to their work. And it became more important because, I mean, during the COVID, we were all at home, but journalism was still working online. And so there was a lot of misinformation in the system. And journalists are forced to communicate with their sources or their correspondent by the internet. And in the quest to do that, sensitive information are sent to the wrong people just because they have no knowledge on how to keep that safe. So with that basis in mind, I set out to write a 3-page article, which I'll post the link in the chat, or Evelyn will help me do that. I wrote a research article out of that, and it's confirmed the fact that now this research is limited to Ghana, so I wouldn't know the state of that in other countries. But it has shown that in Ghana, first of all, a majority of the journalists who are already working have no knowledge on encryption. They've heard the word before, but they don't know what it is. They don't even know the types. They don't know how to do basic encryption. So I told myself that, okay, fine, even though the training is over and the initiative is over, I think with the fact that they don't know, I could do more by teaching them how to encrypt knowledge just with the basic that I've learned. So I went ahead to plan a workshop, which I will discuss at the latter part of my time. Yes. So some of the challenges that I faced, because I wouldn't say that it was a smooth implementation for me. One of my major challenge is the COVID restriction, because the training actually happened when the pandemic was high. And so a lot of people were not allowed to move on. Actually, Ghana was on lockdown from March till August. So we were not supposed to go out or anything. So I wasn't able to really do my workshop during that era. And because event centers were closed, obviously, people were not responsive to the call when I sent out an initial registration link, knowing that it has to be a physical event. I didn't get a lot of people interested. Yes. So but how did I overcome the challenge? First of all, I was resilient. I already established that at the beginning, that I really wanted to use the little knowledge that I gained to make a change. I just don't want to be part of the numbers that come for the training and then just go home with a certificate without doing anything. I really wanted to do more. And so I was resilient. I told myself that, okay, even if I have to wait for the lockdown to be over for me to have my physical events, I still would have it, because I really want to do that. And so that the determination keeps me going, and then the desire to train other people helps me to come up with another alternative that had happened. And I would admit that I did that alongside my chapter president. We put a proposal together, and we won a grant to implement the event. So please, next slide. When we actually set on the date, the initial date was in October, but when we got to October, even though the bans on lockdown was lifted, a lot of people were still not interested in coming, and we were not able to get the event centers that we wanted to. So we had to use an alternative event center. That was a conference room in the Ministry of Communication. And surprisingly, it was so ironic, because the event happened on the 19th of November, and Ghana was going to have their election on the 7th of December. So it came, if you see the joke in it, it's very shocking that we are teaching encryption, or we are having an encryption program within the Ministry of Communication, knowing that they communicate all the important information out. So we didn't have a lot of people present. You can see some of the pictures here. We didn't allow a lot of people to come in, because we wanted to observe the protocol. But we had people connect via Zoom, and these were some of the comments that we got on our social media platform, our Twitter platform, after the event. In all, I would want to say that I was very happy that I was able to do something little. It didn't look big. It was not very huge, like a whole conference, but at least I've been able to make an impact of my knowledge that I have learned. And I'm also hoping that next year, hopefully, if things go down, I'll be able to do more. I've started having plans of engaging student journalists on hands-on training and the like. So it's been a good journey for me. It's been a good opportunity for me to have been part of the training. And I'm hoping that for the next call, anyone who would join would want to put in their best and learn. Thank you so much. That's just the little I have to share.